Welcome to the Chemistry, Biology and Math Revision Hub. Today we are doing the Pearson Edexcel International GCSE Biology Paper 1B for January 2022. This is the Part 2 video. I already did the Part 1 and I will do the Part 3 and put their links in the description box. So let's begin with the first question. This is question 5. Scientists carry out an experiment to see if reducing the availability of oxygen affects the production of yogurt. They use increasing acidity as a measure of yogurt production. So they say they record the acidity of two cultures, one with reduced oxygen level and one with the normal oxygen level over 210 minutes. And the table below shows the results. So here we can see as time increases, they recorded the percentage acidity where there is reduced oxygen and where there is normal oxygen. And as you can see in the end, we have the same acidity at the end. So the first question is asking, explain why increasing acidity can be used as a measure of yogurt production. The key thing here is during yogurt making, there is going to be some anaerobic respiration taking place by the lactobacillus bacteria. And because lactic acid is produced, we can use this as a measure to know that yogurt has been produced or the production is almost completed. Or this can be used basically as a measure of telling the person who is carrying out this fermentation process to measure that, to know when the yogurt is ready or when the yogurt has been produced. So we can use this as a measure. The next part says give one abiotic variable that the scientists should control in their experiment. And remember, this is abiotic, meaning non-living variable. So since this is an experiment carried out using microorganisms, so it means we need to control temperature because they have enzymes within them. So the temperature, we can control the mass of the milk, the type of milk used, the volume of milk, the lactose content in the milk as well. So anything to do with this, any one of these, you will get the mark you're looking for. So let me continue to the next page. Here they say, plot a line graph to show how the percentage acidity changes over the period of 210 minutes for the reduced oxygen level and for normal oxygen level. Use a ruler to join the points with a straight line. So I did this using an iPad, so I hope you can see I tried to make some of them straight. So the y-axis or the vertical axis is acidity percentage, and then the horizontal axis is time in minutes. I put the key here. The purple one is for normal oxygen level, and the blue one is for reduced oxygen level. And as you can see, they all end up at the same percentage acidity of 0.7%. So here, by the way, and again, to emphasize, when you are drawing these graphs, you have to use this slab thing. Here we talk about the scale. It has to be appropriate. The labeling has to be done. And then here we have to talk about the axes. The X and Y axes have to be properly put, and then the points have to be well indicated. This one here can be also line. The line has to be drawn. You can take a label as well as line, so the line has to be drawn as well properly. So here they say explain why the changes in percentage acidity are different in the reduced oxygen level and in normal oxygen level. So as we can see here, when there is reduced oxygen, it can lead to more anaerobic respiration, and that could lead to more lactic acid production, hence leading to an increase in acidity. So when you compare these two graphs, you can see when there is reduced oxygen, we see the acidity increases rapidly. This is because there is going to be more anaerobic respiration, leading to more rapid production of lactic acid, and that will lead to increase in acidity rapidly in comparison to this part where we have normal oxygen levels. So that is why that is the way it is. This brings us to the end of question 5. Let's go to question 6. Question 6. The diagram shows part of the gut of a rabbit. The rabbit is a primary consumer and eats mainly grass and other vegetable material. So here we can see there are parts that are labeled. So they've labeled for you the cecum, the appendix, and then others A, B, C, D. So here they're asking, name the parts labeled A, B, C, D. A, you can see this is leading to the stomach, so we can call this the esophagus, or some people can call it the gullet. And B is the stomach. This is similar to the human, the way it's shaped, so that is the stomach. Now, the way this one is coiled, you can see it's going to be the small intestine. And then lastly, we can see the large intestine as part D. So even if you've never studied about the digestive system of a rabbit, you can just use your knowledge from the digestive system of a human, and then you can be able to reason out what they're looking for. So let's continue to the next page. Here they say, the gut of a rabbit has a large cecum and appendix. These contain bacteria that are able to produce the enzyme cellulase. Now, you guys know cellulase should be able to digest cellulose since most of these enzymes derive the names from the substrates they work on. So here they say explain how these bacteria help the rabbits with their diet of plant material. So you remember plant material has cells that have the cell wall, and this is an enzyme cellulase. It should be easy it should be helpful in breaking down the cellulose into smaller molecules that can be used for respiration. So here I say cellulase digests cellulose contained in the plant material that the rabbits eat, and this provides glucose required for aerobic respiration or for respiration, generating energy for the rabbits. Next they say the human gut has a cecum and appendix, but they are much smaller than those in the rabbit. Suggest why the human gut only has a small cecum and appendix. So humans do not digest cellulose, so we do not need, since we do not eat the plant material, we do not need that portion of our gut because we do not digest the cellulose since we do not have the enzymes. So it's irrelevant or it's unnecessary to be longer. So I say because humans do not digest cellulose since they do only eat plant material. They do not only eat plant material. Actually, the food humans eat contains plant material as well as animal material. So since we eat a variety of foods, some that are plants and some that are animals, we do not need to have a longer or wider. These ones they do not have to be that big. They can be small, and that would be okay since we do not digest the cellulose contained in those plant material. So in humans, the appendix also acts as a store of useful bacteria. Now, when they say useful bacteria, it means they're not pathogenic. So scientists have discovered that patients who have had their appendix removed are more likely to develop infections of the colon. Explain how having no appendix may increase the likelihood of bacterial infections in the colon. Now remember, they have said they contain useful bacteria, and useful bacteria is going to compete with any pathogenic bacteria for space and nutrients. So if there is any pathogens that are entering into our digestive system, these useful bacteria outcompete them most of the time in order to protect us from infection. So removal of the appendix will remove these useful bacteria, which can compete for space and nutrients with the pathogenic bacteria, so reducing the chance of infection. So if we do not have that, it means the chance of infection is going to increase due to failure for the good bacteria to outcompete this pathogenic bacteria. So it means the pathogenic bacteria will always succeed and infection will be occurring. So this brings us to the end of question 6. Let us continue to question 7. Question 7. The diagram shows a food web from a woodland ecosystem. So this is the food web we can observe here. They ask, which organisms in the food web is a producer? Which organism is a producer? So of course, producers are usually plant-like. So as you can see, everything leads from here to the right. So the oak tree is the producer. So they continue to ask, which organism acts as both a secondary consumer and a tertiary consumer in the food web? So we have to look through the food chain. So let's see this one here. This is primary, secondary, tertiary. This is primary, secondary. Oh, you can see this is acting as a secondary as tertiary. Let me see. This is primary, that is secondary, that is tertiary. So it's this one here, the blackbird, is the one that is acting as a secondary as well as tertiary. So let's continue to the next page. The amount of energy transferred changes as you move along a food chain. The data comes from an ecosystem containing producers, primary consumers, and secondary consumers. So here we see the levels, either producers, primary consumers, or secondary consumers. And here we can see the energy in each level in kilojoules per meter cube per year. This is the energy here. So the question is asking us, the light energy reaching the sun is 7.1 times 10 power 6 kilojoule per meter squared per year. Explain why plants cannot absorb all this energy. This is easy. Not all the energy is going to be absorbed because some of it can be reflected away and some of it may not fall on the parts of the plant that contain chlorophyll. So I say some wavelengths from sunlight are reflected and some light does not fall on the leaves or in the parts that contain chlorophyll, because chlorophyll is the one that traps the sunlight. So if it falls on the areas that do not contain chlorophyll, then it means it's not going to be trapped and it will not be used by the plant. So I go on to say the table shows the energy is transferred between producer and primary consumer and between primary consumer and secondary consumer. A student states that energy transfer between producer and primary consumer is the most efficient. Determine whether the student's statement is correct. So here I said energy loss between the producer and primary consumer is 98.4%, while energy loss between the primary consumer and secondary consumer is 88.6%. Now, how did I get these two values? I'll take you back up here to show you how I calculated them. As you can see, the loss in here, primary, secondary, you can see it's going to be that minus, the difference is going to be that minus that, which we have this value, divide by the original, which was that value, times 100. So I was trying to get a percentage loss, which was 88.6%. It's lost between that. And then the energy loss between here, we can see it's going to be that minus that, divide by the original, which is that, times 100, giving us a 98.4%. So we can see the loss is greater here in comparison to that. So if I go back here, and I show you that what I wrote, that the energy loss between producer and primary consumer is 98.4%, while energy loss between the primary consumer and the secondary consumer is 88.6%. Then concluding, I say, so the student is wrong because there is more loss between the producer and the primary consumer. Here you had to use evidence, do the calculation, and show evidence to show that the student was not right. Woodlice feed on dead and decaying plant material in the soil. The photographs show how a woodlouse can curl up into a ball. This behavior is an example of a reflex response. So we can see this uncalled and when it's called. This is state what is meant by a reflex response. A reflex response is an involuntary response, could be an automatic response, spontaneous, unconscious, but I prefer you say involuntary. So the next part says give a reason why this reflex response benefits the louse. It protects it from predators. So if there is anything, maybe it's scared or almost being eaten, when it calls up, it can protect itself from predators. That is the basic thing. So continuing on to the next page, here they say describe how this reflex response could have evolved by natural selection. Every time they talk about natural selection, you have to know a random mutation. You have to talk about a random mutation. Then you talk about variation. Then you have to talk about, of course, survival, reproduction, and then passing on the alleles to the offspring. So here I said a gene mutation occurred and caused variation. And again, remember, they're asking how this reflex evolved. Maybe a random mutation occurred that gave some of the woodlice this ability, the ability to call, while the others did not have that ability. So the woodlice that had the ability to roll up survived, while those that couldn't were eaten, so they did not survive. The survivors reproduced and passed on their alleles to their offsprings, and over generation, now most of the available woodlouse can all curl up because they have all inherited that allele, which gives them this benefit basically to survive or to protect themselves from predators. This is the end of question 7, and it brings us to the end of this section, which is part 2 of the paper. So thank you for being with us. Please do not forget to subscribe, and I will put the link to part 1 as well as part 3 of this video in the description box. See you next time. Bye bye.